we wanted to talk about the Injustice trailer, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right, cool. So on the other side of this, they released the first trailer for Injustice. This is the animated film that is based off of the video game. Now, I have never played the video game, but I'm very familiar with the story because they adapted that story into a comic book form that they took from the video game. And that comic book series was so popular, it went through like multiple versions, and they really kind of explored and fleshed out that whole world. And a lot of this stuff comes from that idea that actually comes from the Mark Waid Alex Ross series Kingdom Come, which is the idea that spoiler alert, everyone, you can see it in the trailer. If you watch the trailer, it's in the trailer. The Joker kills Lois Lane, and that puts Superman on this knife's edge, where he realizes the only way that the world is going to have order is if he forces the world to have order. Because he is so tortured and heartbroken over the death of Lois Lane and his unborn child, which they actually show you that in the trailer, that he is unable to take a step back and be the kind of Superman that we know. And he becomes a more totalitarian enforcer and decides to bring the world to order. And that puts him basically in direct conflict, obviously, with other members of the Justice League. And people start, drawing lines and allegiances, and everything just kind of spirals out of control. And that's where you get the Injustice story. So I saw this trailer. I've only watched this trailer just like the Matrix trailer. I only watched it once. I thought it looked pretty good. My only thing with this kind of stuff I keep coming back to is when they take a video game and they adapt it into a different form, and then they put it into 2D animation. I don't understand why they just don't try to animate the CG characters and have it have the same kind of realistic feel. Maybe there's a cost thing there. I don't know what the deal is with that. I'm always surprised that they're not exploring that style more. I mean, what do you think, Eric? I mean, do you think it's kind of...
That's an interesting point, and it's funny because I don't necessarily hear a lot of gamers necessarily make that complaint, but you would think that they would. You definitely would think that they would. Now, I actually have my copy right here of Injustice because I knew we were going to be talking about that. So I do have the game, but full disclosure here, I sucked at it and I didn't finish it. I really wanted to because I wanted to finish the story, but I suck at it. I'm terrible at fighting games because I'm not any good at the button combinations and things like that. I'm a masher. I basically just mash buttons, and it only gets you so far. And I think it was actually Black Adam. I can't get past him. He's too tough for me. So, but it's an interesting story. But the problem that I have with it at this point is I almost feel like they waited too long because we've already seen this with the Snyder Cut, and we've already kind of seen it, I guess, in Lois and Clark, right? So it's like, is it too late at this point? Because it seems like everybody else has already jumped on this let's make Superman into an evil being thing. Seems like it's old news.
It's interesting too, because I feel like this concept of the evil Superman has kind of run its course. And I'll draw a different comparison. I'll bring out the boys, because Homelander on the boys, I mean, that is very much the evil Superman idea. Now, there's different permutations of this, whether you want to talk about Homelander, whether you want to talk about Plutonian from the was it Irredeemable? I think it's Irredeemable series. I actually worked on that series. I can't remember the name of it. It's really bad. But, there are this concept of the evil Superman gone wrong is a concept that's interesting. But I kind of feel like you, Eric. I mean, I feel like maybe this idea has kind of been done to death at this point. And to an extent, I feel like this is a concept that the general audience has told us they don't like. People did not like that idea in Batman v Superman. There were people that pushed back on this concept, even in the Snyder cut of the Justice League. I don't feel like people like this idea of the Superman gone wrong. So that being said, the trail looks nice. I mean, I'll watch it. I'm curious to see it. But for me, the biggest off-putting thing, besides what you bring up, Eric, which I think is a great point, like is, are people done with the evil Superman idea? But beyond that, for me, the biggest thing is, why don't they actually try to do this in a video game style? Where, like for example, I remember when they were doing all the Batman Arkham games. One of the coolest things I've ever seen still was they had it was a sequence that was Batman versus Deathstroke the Terminator. And part of the reason I regret that we didn't get to see the Ben Affleck Batman movie that he was making, where you were going to have Deathstroke the Terminator versus Batman, which is what was being reported, was because, man, that stuff that they released as publicity for that game where Batman was fighting Deathstroke the Terminator was so killer. And I just don't know why they don't do that with this. I mean, this is coming from the video game. If it was done in that style, maybe they could update it a little bit or make a few tweaks here or there. But I think that would be the way I would like to experience it. I mean, me personally, that's, to me, is the thing that is the most off-putting, is just the stylistic approach.
Yeah, I could see that, and again, it's I'm interested because I don't necessarily hear that criticism more often, and you kind of felt like you would, but in all honesty, I don't know if this film has enough of a profile to even get people upset, Dave. That could be kind of the other side of it, is because a lot of these animated movies, let's just face it, they're kind of relegated to the straight to DVD dust pile, right? I mean, that's just the truth of it, regardless of how good the films actually are. So I think you might have a little bit more of a reaction if this was sort of on that sort of A tier, in terms of recognizability and everything, and also being pushed the same way as Matrix. You know what I mean? If it was like up on that same sort of pedestal, maybe you would get that kind of backlash. But I think a lot of people, that the people that this is meant for, the people like, hey, just be happy we made something for you. You know what I mean? Just be happy you got something. So,
well, and along those lines, here's the reason. Sorry, I forgot something in my eyes. Here's the reason that this really bothers me the most. When they first started doing these direct to DVD animated features, I remember being in the room at San Diego Comic-Con when they announced they were going to start doing them. And the goal was they were going to take these established storylines and they were going to make an attempt to adapt them in a similar style, so that when you're watching the animated film, it feels very much like what you'd read.
Like the book coming on screen.
Yeah, exactly. The graphic novel come to life, right?
Yeah.
Like that was the whole point. And I'll never forget this, because this directly goes back to the fact that from the jump with this stuff, something was off. When they did the Doomsday, one of the first ones, the Doomsday, it looked like Batman, the Superman animated series, but then they were adapting the graphic novel series, and they took all these side characters out. Booster Gold's missing, Blue Beetle's missing, Fire's missing, Ice is missing, because the Justice League that we had at that time was the last permutation of the Bwahaha Funny Justice League that was a hallmark of that era Justice League, and when Doomsday walked through them and basically put most of them in a coma and just messed some of them up so bad that they could never be superheroes again. All those characters, like right off the gate, they go, we're going to try to bring the graphic novel to life. And here's the first one. We've changed almost all of it. It's almost unrecognizable, but you're going to love it. And that was my problem with it. And then the next few things they do after were actually really good. Like New Frontier is so great because it's so faithful to the storyline and to Darwin Cook's artwork, and it's so great. And then from then on, it's real hit or miss. I know some people liked Crisis on Infinite Earths, other people hated it. Was it Crisis on Two Earths, or whatever the hell the name of it was, the one with the Injustice gang? Some people liked it, some people didn't like it. But Then you got Under the Red Hood. Under the Red Hood is really great. And it's just this weird hodgepodge of things where it's like what they said they were going to do and what they did doesn't quite line up. And I feel like this is another great example of that, because it's the exact same thing. This comes from a video game. We're going to adapt that video game story that you love so much. We're going to give you a film, but it's almost unrecognizable from the game that you played, but it's the same story, right? Like, you like that, right? Like, and that's the part about this, the DC direct to whatever it is streaming stuff now that bothers the hell out of me. It's kind of like, hey, it's just like that thing. We just changed almost all of it, but you're going to love it. And then there's others of them that are like, Year One is so faithfully adapted. It is so great. It feels like Mazzucchelli's artwork come to life. Year One is so great. Dark Knight Returns is really great. At times it feels very much like, the Frank Miller story come to life. Darwin Cook's New Frontier, so great. It's like it came to life. And then other ones, the Superman Doomsday, I don't know. This other one over here, I don't know. Like, and that's the thing that's really weird. And this falls into that same place. It's like, I don't know, because it just doesn't look right to me.
Yeah, I can understand that. I can definitely understand that. It doesn't look like the game. There's no doubt about that. So it's definitely very, very different. David Motz mentions that he is a fellow button masher. So I'm curious, David Motz, if you have a little bit of insight into that as well, as far as if you've seen the trailer, if you think it's, if you're kind of getting on Dave's vibe as well, as far as it just being very different than the visual style of the game. And then David Motz also said that it feels like a what if series in a lot of ways. It feels like a what if series. And Injustice, in a lot of ways, that is what it is. I mean, that is the nature of what Injustice is. That's what the whole premise of the game in the first place, that whole idea, basically Superman going bad kind of a thing. So it is a what if. I mean, that is actually what the series is. So that's fair. That's definitely fair.
And for me, there's so many great, like, in my mind, seminal, still celebrated, still talked about, beloved graphic novel series that DC has never even attempted to touch. Golden Age. Golden Age is so great. I mean, Golden Age will make a great animated film done in an animated style. We've got the Rock Black Adam movie coming up. Black Rain, such a great storyline with such a great character. There's so much really, truly tremendous material. Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, the fact that they've never attempted, we had that one series that was made for the DC universe, but beyond that, they've never really ever attempted to adapt that material. And that material would be really great in an animated film, I feel. And they could do it where it's R-rated and for an older, kind of mature kind of an audience, and really get into that kind of horror vibe. Like, I mean, there's so much really, really great material in the DC universe that they could do stuff with, that sometimes the material they select to adapt, which I feel Injustice is great material to adapt. But there's been other things that they've done. Like, for example, it feels like they spent like a decade adapting the New 52, and I feel like no one cared. Like, and that's hard for me to say because they adapted Flashpoint, and I worked on Flashpoint, and that's really kind of cool, and I'm glad they did that. But and Grifter's in it and whatever, and that's cool, But they also, it's ironic, they changed almost everything about the Wonder Woman stuff, which Scott and I worked on. Almost all of it changed. They redesigned everything, and they changed the story in a really bad way to where it makes Wonder Woman's betrayal even weirder. Like it was already kind of questionable in the first place, but when you see the events unfold in the story, you go, oh, okay. And then they made it so weird in Flashpoint that you're like, what? I remember literally audibly saying, what? While I was watching it. And I worked on it. Not the animated film, but the original story. I'm like, what? Like, why did you do that? That makes no sense. So that's the problem with the direct to streaming DVD stuff that the DC Universe DC people have been doing for years. There's all this really great material. Their selection material is questionable. Their choices questionable. And with this, I'll watch it. I'm excited to see it. The material is worthy of being adapted. My only question is, maybe you could have made it look more like the video game. So, and then the funny thing is, the funny thing about this, Eric, is if they'd had, I don't know if they're going to do it behind the scenes. It'd be really funny if they did it behind the scenes, and if they used CGI to basically previs some of this. That's the funny part, would be if they use CGI to previs it, but they just won't just do CGI for this particular project when it probably should be CGI.
Yeah. Yeah, could very well be. Could very well be. And then, of course, here's another perspective with David Mott saying, I suck at fighting games, so I never tried it. And I feel like there's a lot more people who probably will be interested in this movie who probably didn't have anything to do with the video game. So that's part of it too. So
well, and I never played Injustice because when Injustice came out, I was too I've said this before on the show. I reached a point in my career where I had to choose if I was going to keep playing video games or if I was going to work.
Right.
And I chose to work instead of continuing to play video games. So I kind of gave up video games to focus on working because I was at a crossroads and I couldn't continue to do both. One of them had to go. So I said goodbye to video games for my career.
So you've never played the game either?
I've never played it, but the funny thing is I'm an avid fighting game guy. I talked before, like I used to do regional tournaments for Street Fighter back when it was Street Fighter 2 and then Street Fighter 2, Super Street Fighter 2. Like I was on the tournament circuit and I used to play regionally kind of in the Mid-South when they would have like money buy-in tournaments and stuff and you pay a fee and you compete against other people. Like I used to do that all the time. And I'm a big fighting game guy. The last game I played pretty religiously actually was the DC versus Mortal Kombat game.